I in my long time of not living for God, I made some poor financial decisions. One of those financial decisions were to buy a house and not pay on it, which is like dumb, right? I got a knock on the door. They were going to take me to court for not paying for my mortgage. Now, mind you, I'm in the military, right? And I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? Now, mind you, this is the same year where I had this radical transformation where I'm crying on the floor and all the other stuff. So I was able to be delivered from that through my obedience to God. And then I was able to be delivered from trying to show off to other people, right? And only please God. I learned there that obedience precedes favor. If you desire the things of God, then you're going to reap the favor, whatever that favor is. And that's what I walk in. My name is Joshua Cole. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. I am here in Kansas. I'm in the military. I have a beautiful wife, a lovely daughter, and one child on the way. I'm the oldest of four. I have two younger brothers and one younger sister. And yeah, military brat. Both my parents were in the Army, so fortunately, we didn't move a lot while we were stationed, or they were in Hawaii. So I got a chance to kind of have some continuity there. Raised in church, but didn't really have a relationship. Kind of just played the part, and until I had my radical encounter with God. So that changed everything. It went from religion to relationship real quick.
Can you share a time when God has revealed something in His Word or in your heart that He wanted you to walk in obedience to?
For me, I have learned it's been like indoctrinated, I guess you can say, that growing up, the power of life and death is in the tongue, right? And those that receive it will enjoy the fruit. So either you'll love the fruit of life or you love the fruit of death. Either way, you're gonna love those fruits. So watching what I say, how I say it, what I'm proclaiming, what I'm declaring, was real big for me earlier on. But I didn't realize it hit until like later on, whenever I made some poor choices, and I was like, oh man, I definitely should obey God and speak life over me, or speak life around my friends or my family, so I can see the good.
And how did that correlate to that radical encounter with God?
So I had walked away from God, not from anybody. Like, God didn't walk me away, just people. I had saw a lot of people saying one thing and doing some things totally different. And then I saw how well they turned out after, not realizing that they probably had to go through some grace journey or whatever it is. So then after I had saw that, I was like, oh, it can happen to me too. So I can go out, do whatever I want to do, and then know that God is gracious enough to take me back in. And I think it really hit when it comes to obedience. Like, it really hit whenever it was 2019, and I had saw all my friends who are serving God. They're doing things well, but they just retired. And this is prior to COVID. And God had put a burden on my heart. At the time, I was in my room sitting, and I was about to go out, hang out with some friends. And God had put a burden on my heart right then to care for people. And I was like, oh man. And it went back to the words that were spoken over me as far as speaking life or death. So 2019 was whenever I had that radical encounter. I was crying, weeping, because I felt the burden of my friends continue to run with Christ, and me kind of being in the back of a wheelbarrow, just telling them to hurry up, or throwing a rock at them, or just not really being effective, not being an effective believer. So that was whenever I had my radical encounter with God.
And so, was there a realization that Jesus was calling you to something better in your life, or calling you to what you had talked about, proclaiming and speaking more boldly in your faith?
That was the thing. So I was really ashamed because no one was like, I didn't want like other people to know that I was a believer. So I used to, I was like, because unfortunately, there has been a bad picture of of yeah, there's just been a bad picture of it. So I was like, well, I don't like I love you, even though like I don't agree necessarily with what you're doing. As a believer, I'm still supposed to love you. But then if I say, oh, I'm a believer, then they're gonna be like, oh, you're just like the rest of them, right? And I'm like, I'm not rule based. I'm not legalistic. I swear I'm not. But the those type of things flared up, right? Like, all right, well, um, when I was younger, I had a call on my life to teach, right, to preach, and I heard that, right. So then what I ended up doing was mimicking what I saw. So my pastor preached, he yelled, I yelled, right, because I figured that was a thing. So I was really doing like my own thing, and everything he said, I said, right, really, and not realizing I was worshiping him more than I was worshiping God, right. So how he responded, I'd be like, well, such and such said this, and that's how I'm going to speak it, right? Which to me, right, it goes back to the life and death, right? Like those are not my words, and those don't bring me life, right? Those are his words based off of his journey with Christ, right? So I had, yeah, I was prophesied over that, and I always thought like with prophecies, there wasn't going to come no type of resistance. There was going to be no war when it comes to prophetic words over your life. Once God said it, then it's going to happen, right? Yeah, that in the perfect bubble, sure, right? But to every word spoken, just like Adam and Eve in the garden, God confirmed Adam and Eve, but then the enemy tempted them to really think, did he really say what he thought he said? Or are you really gonna die? Are you really gonna do this? So I was, yeah, I learned like, okay, well, there's two ways I can do this. I can either, um, continue to mimic what I see and walk in the prophetic calling, right? Or I can partner with Jesus and say, okay, God, let me be obedient to what you've spoken through the man of God over my life. And let me see what happens with that. It took 15 years, but but when it hit in 2019, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is what you mean. So like like the fruits of the spirit, love, joy, peace, all those different things. Oh, I have to display that. I have to show that. I have to live that. I have to proclaim that over my life. I have to declare that over my life. I got to declare that in my walk. If I don't do those things, then just like Jesus said, a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. So if I'm not walking those things out, if I'm not living those things out, then there's no way I can produce good fruit. So I'm like, okay, well, for one, that's a lot of weight. In 2019, that was a lot of weight to carry. So I got emotional. I was like, I don't want to do this. I felt like Jeremiah. I felt like all the other ones who had a calling from a young age, but just never walked in it. And then you see the weight, like it's not God revealing to me all the wrong that I've done in my past. It's God showing me that he's going to be gracious enough to forgive me for them and still give me what was prophesied over me years ago, that purpose life that I'm supposed to be living in to glorify him in the things that I'm doing.
And as you started walking in obedience, what happened?
Favor. So financial favor. I in my long time of not living for God, I made some poor financial decisions. However, I still wanted the things like marriage and having all the things that I saw. Um, one of those financial decisions were to buy a house and not pay on it, which is like dumb, right? But I looked at it like, oh, I get this money. I can either do this or I can spend money on here. So I did. I think one translation calls it righteous living, right? So like I did that. I spent money on everything. I spent money on experiences. I did all those things, and uh, my wife now, she was like, "Hey, if we're gonna be serious about this, you gotta take care of your finances." And I was like, "Oh, we're good." I got a knock on the door that they were going to take me to court for not paying for uh, my mortgage. Now, mind you, I'm in the military, right? And I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? So of course, I let the military, like I let my supervisor know, yeah, I'm in big trouble. Like, I don't know what to do. I know what I've done. It's not going to help me right now, right? We have to do something about this. So they helped me out. We got a plan together to come from under that. Like, I had to pay extra on it. And then my wife, she was like, what's some other things going on in your life? Like, let's unpack this. Now, mind you, this is the same year where I had this radical transformation where I'm crying on the floor and all the other stuff. It's almost like I had like open heart surgery, right? Like being right with God. And then also he's taking care of all the other things that I have done, like not necessarily revisiting those things, but covering them. So yeah, I had a pretty low credit score, and I was ashamed to even bring it up to my future wife. Like, I was like, at the time, my wife now, I was like, so here's my credit score. She's like, okay, so here's a plan, right? If you follow these things, then we can see it. We can see some progress. I was like, okay, I'll do that, because right now my ears are open, my heart is open. Like, I'm just ready for this to just go away, right? 6 months. So January 2019 is when I had my crazy radical transformational moment. And then July 2019 is when I proposed to her, right? So 6 months, in that 6 months time, we were able to kind of figure out the finance things. Now, what's amazing is the Bible says that he that finds a wife finds a good thing and finds favor from the Lord. So I believe God honored my pursuit in finding a wife. And with that, I was able to get the benefits of the favor from him. So my credit score shot up in those 6 months after, and it's like a crazy miracle story later, but my credit score shot up to like crazy numbers. It was low. I don't know if I can say it on here, but it was definitely like 536, right? And now it's up there now. Like, I am in the good area, almost at excellent, right? But it's because I remained obedient to God first and obedient to the one that he sent for me to have as a wife, right? So she was really good at like getting me a plan on best financial practices, not being a spender all the time, not trying to show off to everybody, because I came out of a season where I did that. I showed off. I had all the extra things. I don't want to necessarily blame the military for that, because the military didn't do that. But you have peer groups within, and that's in any job, right? Any job you go to, you almost want to keep up with them, right? So I was able to be delivered from that through my obedience to God. And then I was able to be delivered from trying to show off to other people, right? And only please God. And then that's how, walking in his obedience, I was able to obtain like crazy amount of favor. I learned there that obedience precedes favor. There's like this saying that I used to hear in my church growing up, favor isn't fair. Well, it's not about fairness. It's about obedience. If you desire the things of God, in Deuteronomy it says to follow my commands, follow my word, meditate on my word. Don't let it depart from your mouth, right? These are all these things that God requires us to do, and to worship him, because he's holy of it and he's worthy of it. So if we obey those things, then you're going to reap the favor, whatever that favor is. And that's what I walk in.
Did walking in obedience cost you anything?
Absolutely. I had not necessarily friends, but there was a lifestyle that I thought that I could have, even like serving God, and right, like God showed me real quick there's just no way. Like, you can't have two masters, is what the Bible says, but you can't serve two things. So I had to serve wholeheartedly and be obedient to God wholeheartedly to really understand that. And the way I understood that was there were some things that just I became disinterested in. There were things that just kind of walked away. Like I had friends that walked away. They didn't even say bye or anything. They just walked away, right? Uh, I had things that I was interested in, um, sports teams. I still love sports, but not at the level where it compromises my faith. So like there were just there was times I used to stay up to like 1, 2 in the morning because you know I watch sports and then I watch the recap because I gotta watch the recap. And I gotta watch every single player getting interviewed. I had to watch all these things, but those things became less and less interested, and being in bed at 10 o'clock became more and more interesting. But also devotions, reading my word daily, and praying with my family. Those became more louder in in my life than the other things that I were doing prior. And I credit that to my obedience in God, my obedience to God.
What have you learned through this process, and how is your life different now that you've walked in obedience in this particular area?
My faith increased in this wise. I have learned that whenever God says, all right, I need you to do this, I have learned that even delayed obedience is disobedience. And I have felt effects in some way. I can't really describe them, but it's like effects where either I feel convicted or I feel like, oh man, I was supposed to do that. For example, I had this job that I'm in right now. I'm an instructor, and I did not pursue being the leader of the school. It's equivalent to a principal. It's called a commandant. I didn't pursue that at all, right? But I believe God has told me that I was going to be the commandant, right? Well, after he had told me that, I proceeded to see them hire 5 people. So I lost track. I was like, God, you told me this. Like, I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling the process of sitting in an interview, watching who my future boss might be when you told me that that's my position. So in disobedience, I definitely was irate. I was out. I was like, and instead of like going to God with my irritability or my frustration, like I brought it to my wife. I was like, babe, can you believe what they're doing here? I can't believe they're doing this. She's like, did you pray? I was like, I don't want to pray right now. Like, I want you to hear my heart. Like, and she's like, you need to go talk to God about this, right? But I've learned that the reason why 5 people got hired was because after the first time, I didn't go to God. I went to my wife. After the second time, I still went to my wife. After the third hire, I went to my wife, right? I delayed the process of the promise being fulfilled because of my disobedience to God. So after and it takes me a while. I'm not the smartest one in the world. But after the 5th time, my wife tells me, she's like, I thought we talked about this. Like, why are you still talking about it? I was like, because they're hiring a 5th person. Like, it's a different person. And she said, when God does this, he's showing you the same thing because he wants you to get something out of it. And what you're not getting out of it is you're not trusting him. You're trusting in your emotions at the time and your feelings, and you're validating it by saying, I heard what God said. This is what it should happen. When really what you should do is trust God, even when it doesn't look like what he said is happening. You got to trust him at his word and saying that that's what he said is going to happen. It's going to happen. So I learned in that my delay in fulfilling that promise was because of my lack of obedience in him and trust in him.
Thanks for sharing, Joshua. Last question. Who is Jesus to you?
Oh, Jesus is a true friend. Yeah, it's a true friend. I have put myself in many different situations where I've had people judge me based off of my chapter or that page that they saw me or that experience or that moment they had with me. And I learned that Jesus, regardless of the many chapters, he obviously God is out there and finish our faith, but Jesus definitely did not close the book on me.
Mm.
It's funny. We always talk about the prodigal son, but Jesus to me is, through his grace, has showed me what it's like to be the prodigal prophet in Jonah. Jonah, I feel like I relate to because he told God told him to do something, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go do something else." It's not like the prodigal son where he says, "Give me what's mine. I'm out of here. I don't care what's mine. I'm just not gonna do what you just said. I'm gonna be disobedient. I'm gonna go and do something else." And what Jonah learned in that process was he paid his way through disobedience, right? But God was still gracious enough for him to come back. And even after that, Jonah was still mad at the people. But God had to remind him that same grace that I gave you just like 3 days ago when you were in the belly of a fish is the same grace I need you to extend to your people. And that's how I feel Jesus is for me. I have learned that I have paid a lot for a price that he already paid for, but he still doesn't close the book on me. He's like, all right, well, let's walk through this. Take my hand. Let's walk through this thing together. Let's walk through you coming out of dealing with unforgiveness and walk into forgiveness. Or let's walk through you being petty, because I can be petty at times. And let's walk into being kind, having compassion for people. So that's who Jesus is for me. He's the friend that can be like, all right, I see where you're at. Come on, let's go. Let's go to the other side. And I'm like, all right, even though there's times he's gonna drag me along. Because I'm like, well, but this over here. He's like, come on, we're gonna go there. And there's times where Jesus will walk with me through the long path and still be like, all right, but he's not gonna be the one that's gonna be petty back at me and say, see, if you would have listened, this would have happened. No, he's like, cool, I'm glad you saw that, you experienced that. My grace covers that. My love for you covers that. Let's walk back to this path over here. So that's who Jesus is to me, a true friend.